All right, let's dive into something pretty interesting today, huh? We're going to be looking at how we prepare and train teachers, especially when it comes to that hot topic, tenure.
Yeah, and not the old school put in your time and you're good kind of tenure. We're talking about what some are calling tenure with teeth, where
Yeah.
you got to prove your skills and dedication if you want that job security.
We're basing this deep dive on the work of Dr. Howie Knoff, who's really trying to shake things up, in the education system, and in a good way, I think. He's laid out this really cool framework on his blog, and we're going to break it down for you.
So Dr. Knopf identifies four main pillars for building a really strong teaching force. You got to hire the right folks.
Right.
Then you got to have a strong induction process and continuing appointments with clear expectations and solid leadership at every level. It's all connected, but we're going to focus on that second pillar today, the induction, because that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so induction. What's so different about this approach compared to the usual sink or swim experience a lot of new teachers go through?
Well, first off, it recognizes that not all new teachers are the same.
Right.
You got your novice teacher fresh out of college, you got your transfer teacher who's got experience but is new to the district, and then you got your transition teacher who's switching grade levels or subject areas. Each one needs their own kind of program to help them get up to speed and really thrive.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, imagine a teacher, right, who's been awesome in elementary school for years, but now they're moving up to middle school. That's a whole different world. Different kids, tougher curriculum, everything. They'd need very specific support to make that work.
Exactly. And that's where tenure with teeth really kicks in. Instead of just getting tenure automatically after a set number of years, Dr. Knopf says teachers should have to prove they're competent in three main areas first. Two of them are pretty straightforward. Research and curriculum development, meaning they're up to date on all the latest stuff in their field, and instruction and student learning. So basically, can they actually teach effectively, and are their students making progress?
Okay, sounds good so far. But you said there were three areas, right? What's the third one?
That's what makes it unique. School district community service. It's not just like volunteering on the weekends. It's about recognizing that teachers are super important members of their communities and their role goes way beyond the classroom.
Wow, never heard that as part of tenure requirements. So what are we talking about here? Like serving on school committees, doing parent workshops, stuff like that?
Could be all that and more, yeah. It's about building a sense of responsibility and connection, making sure teachers are really involved in their schools and communities.
All right, so we get the why behind this induction thing. Now let's talk about the how. You mentioned it was a multi-year process, right?
Right. Dr. Knopf suggests a program over 3 to 5 years, dependent on the teacher. It involves what we call scaffolded activities, starting with the basics and getting more complex over time, and lots of chances for teachers to show they've mastered specific skills.
So what kind of skills are we talking about here? Is it all subject specific, or are there some things every teacher needs to be good at no matter what they teach?
Definitely some core stuff that applies across the board.
Hmm.
First up, you got what Dr. Knopf calls the core four of academics: literacy, math, oral expression, and written expression.
Right. Makes sense. Those are the fundamental skills kids need for, well, pretty much any subject.
Absolutely.
Mm.
You can't teach history if your students can't read properly or write a decent essay,
Mm.
right? And even a music teacher needs a good grasp of math to explain things like rhythm and timing.
I see how it all ties together.
Then there's the second area, which is classroom management and social emotional learning. And this is where a lot of teachers struggle, even the ones with all the knowledge. You can have the best lesson plans in the world, but if you can't manage a classroom full of kids with all their different needs and, help them with their emotions, it's all for nothing.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like having all the ingredients for a fancy meal, but you don't know how to cook. You need both. The knowledge and you need the skills to create that positive, productive learning environment.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, the third area, and this one's getting more and more important these days, is technological and computer-assisted instruction. It's not just about knowing how to use PowerPoint, though.
Right. It's about knowing how to really UEC technology, to personalize learning, get students excited, meet all those different needs they got. We're talking interactive software, assistive technology, data tools. It's a whole world.
Exactly. Teachers got to be comfortable not just using these tools, but also figuring out if they're actually working and really integrating them thoughtfully to their teaching.
Okay, and then finally we got district or school-specific initiatives, because let's face it, every school's got their own special programs and priorities, right?
Exactly. A new teacher might need to get up to speed on a specific reading intervention program, or maybe a school-wide behavior system, or a particular approach to social-emotional learning that the district uses.
Okay, so we got the what now in terms of the skills and content areas, but how does this all actually play out, in the induction process? How are teachers supported and evaluated along the way?
Well, one of the key tools Dr. Knopf highlights is Danielson's framework for teaching. And this isn't just about evaluation. It's about giving teachers a clear path for professional growth. It breaks down effective teaching into four main domains: planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and professional responsibilities.
So a domain is like a big category of teaching skills, and inside each domain, there are specific components that get evaluated.
Exactly. Like, for example, in the planning and preparation domain, teachers are assessed on things like how well they know the content, how well they understand student learning, their ability to design coherent instruction, and how good they are at developing assessments that actually measure what students have learned.
So it's not just about checking boxes, it's about looking at the whole picture of what makes a good teacher.
Exactly. And it's not just about the basics either. The induction process should also focus on things like cultural sensitivity, differentiated instruction, and multi-tiered interventions.
Which, in the end, helps all L students,
Yeah,
right? Because it's about creating a better, more inclusive learning environment for everybody.
could agree more. Now that we have a solid understanding of what happens during this multi-year induction period, let's talk about what comes next. The actual tenure process itself.
All right, bring on the teeth. What does a teacher actually have to do to earn tenure in this model?
Well, once a teacher has gone through that whole induction program, the rigorous one we talked about, they can apply for tenure, but it's not like a guaranteed thing.
So they don't just get a pat on the back and automatic tenure for finishing the program. What do they got to do to prove they're ready?
Well, they got to put together what's called a tenure application portfolio, right? This is where they show off everything they've done, how they've grown in those three areas we talked about: research and curriculum development, instruction and student learning, and yeah, that school district community service too.
So it's kind of like a super resume for teachers, but instead of just listing their experience, they're showing real proof of what they can do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They include things like examples of their lesson plans, student work that shows how much the kids have learned, data on student achievement, uh, proof of all the professional development they've done, and how they've contributed to the school and the community.
I bet that portfolio gets pretty thick after a few years of hard work.
Oh, yeah, it definitely shows they're serious about teaching. But it's not just a one-way street. There's a tenure committee, usually made up of administrators, experienced teachers, sometimes even people from the community, and they review these portfolios.
That's pretty cool. So it's not just one person deciding, it's a whole group of folks with different perspectives coming together to see if the teacher's got what it takes.
Exactly. Makes it a lot fairer. And
Mhm.
sometimes there's even a presentation and a Q&A where the teacher can talk directly to the committee.
Wow, that adds a whole other level. I bet that can be kind of scary for the teacher, but it also gives them a chance to, really show off their passion and what they know.
Absolutely. It's a chance for them to connect the dots between their portfolio
Yeah.
and how they see teaching, explain their methods in their own words, and answer any questions the committee might have.
Sounds like a tough process, but it really makes sure that teachers who get tenure are, truly ready for it.
Yeah, it is. And for novice teachers, there's one more step: a mid-tenure review that happens at the end of their third year.
Ah, so it's like a check-in to make sure they're on the right track.
Exactly. It's a chance for them to get feedback from mentors who know what they're doing, see if there are any areas they need help with, and maybe tweak how they're teaching if they need to.
This whole system really seems to put a lot of emphasis on always getting better, not just evaluation.
It absolutely does. It recognizes that teaching is tough, and it takes constant learning and thinking about how you're doing. But of course, not every teacher gets tenure on their first try. So what happens then?
That's a good question. It's got to be tough if you put all that work into the portfolio and the presentation and still don't get tenure. What are the options in that situation?
Well, if the tenure committee sees some things the teacher could improve, the superintendent can give them more time to work on those things and try again. Could be another year, maybe even up to 3, depending on what's going on.
So it's not necessarily a no forever, it's more like a not yet.
Exactly. It's a chance for the teacher to get specific help, and really focus on improving those areas where they need it. It's all about making sure that teachers who DO earn tenure are really ready for the challenge, and meet those high standards.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense for both the teacher and the school, right? Instead of just making a quick decision based on one evaluation. But what happens if, even after that extra time, the teacher still isn't meeting the requirements?
Well, in that case, the superintendent would probably tell the teacher that their contract won't be renewed after the next year. It's a tough conversation to have, but it shows how important it is to keep that high level of professionalism.
I'm sure it's never an easy decision. But this way seems a lot fairer and clearer than just letting someone go with no explanation or chance to improve.
It definitely brings more structure and accountability to the whole thing. But now that we've talked about all the technical stuff, I kind of want to circle back to something we mentioned earlier, that school, district, and community service requirement.
Yeah, that really caught my attention. It's not something you usually think about when you're talking about teacher qualifications, but I'm starting to see how it fits into Dr. Knopf's whole idea. What are your thoughts on that part of the tenure with teeth model?
Well, like we said before, teachers aren't just teaching facts, right? They're a big part of their communities, requiring them to be active, in school committees, volunteer stuff, community events. It strengthens that connection and lets them make a difference outside of school, too.
It's like that saying, it takes a village to raise a child, right? And teachers are a crucial part of that village.
Exactly. And this requirement encourages them to, try new things, connect with families and people in the community, and really get a better understanding of, like, the bigger picture of where they're teaching.
I can see how that would be really valuable, not just for the community, but for the teacher themselves, to grow professionally.
Oh, for sure. It exposes them to different ways of thinking, challenges their own assumptions, and helps them get a more well-rounded understanding of their students' lives and what they need.
Like imagine a teacher who volunteers at a local food bank, or maybe mentors kids in an after-school program. They're seeing firsthand the challenges a lot of families face, building relationships with people in the community, and developing a deeper sense of empathy for their students.
Exactly. And those experiences can change how they teach in so many ways. They might be more aware of, like, signs of food insecurity in their students, better connecting families with resources, or maybe even more passionate about including social justice stuff in their lessons.
Wow, it's amazing to think about how much of an impact this kind of requirement could have, both on the teacher and the whole community.
It really shows how connected education is to how well our society functions as a whole.
So we've covered a lot today looking at this tenure with teeth model from different angles. It's a system that's tough, but it's also supportive. It pushes teachers to always be learning, but also gives them the tools and guidance they need to succeed.
It's about raising the bar for the profession, attracting and keeping really good teachers, and making sure that every student gets the best possible education.
It really makes you think differently about all those arguments about tenure. The one saying it just protects bad teachers or stops innovation. This tenure with teeth thing seems like it tackles those issues head on.
Yeah, it's really interesting how this model kind of changes your whole perspective, right?
Yeah.
Instead of seeing tenure as the end goal, like the finish line, it becomes more like a big checkpoint on a journey of, always getting better as a teacher.
And it's not just about setting a high bar for getting into the profession. It's about making sure those high standards stay in place throughout a teacher's whole career.
Right. It's about creating a culture where everyone's always improving, where teachers are encouraged to keep learning, sharpening their skills, and adjusting to whatever their students need at that moment.
I wonder what would happen if, like, more places started using this system. What kind of impact could it have on, teacher quality, how well students do, even just how people see the teaching profession as a whole?
Those are some great questions to think about. Imagine if every new teacher, right, started out with this level of preparation and support, and where growing professionally wasn't just something you're supposed to do, but it's something you're actually helped with.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting thought. We could see less teacher burnout, more teachers feeling good about their jobs, and in the end, a more stable and effective learning environment for the kids.
And don't forget the impact on communities. When teachers are, like, really empowered and involved, they become even more valuable outside the classroom. They can inspire their students to be active citizens, connect families with resources, push for positive changes. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's like this ripple effect, right? It makes those connections between schools and communities stronger, and everyone's working together for the good of everybody.
It really shows how education isn't just about teaching stuff. It's about giving people the power to do things and building a better future for everyone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Knopf's work, I gotta say, I'm feeling pretty inspired. This tenure with teeth model really makes us question what we think about how teachers are prepared and how they grow professionally. It reminds us that teaching is tough, it demands a lot, but it's also incredibly rewarding and, makes a real difference.
And it asks us to think about, how do we build a system that truly supports teachers and gives them the power to do what they do best? A system that recognizes how important they are and invests in their continued growth. Because at the end of the day, it's an investment in our kids, our communities, and the future we're all trying to build.
So, like always, we want to leave you with something to think about. How could this tenure with teeth model be adapted or made even better in your own community or school system? What can we do together to make sure that every student has those awesome, highly qualified, motivated teachers? It's a conversation worth having, a challenge worth taking on, and a future worth fighting for. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep pushing for positive change.